Hey everyone, I've just finished reading On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. You've probably heard of both of those. I'm probably saying both their names wrong. Both heavyweights, intellectual heavyweights, political scholars, historians in one case. Interestingly, both Jewish, because this is obviously a book on Palestine, heated issue, especially for many, well, just say for just about anybody who's seen any news in the last 100 plus days since October the 7th, 2023. I saw this book on a bookshelf. Where was I? I was in Foyles, and I thought I'd just have to read it, given what's going on at the moment. And obviously, I have my opinions on it. Everybody has their opinions on it. But what about when you actually get information from respected sources? I'd say trusted sources, but there are certain parties who will do everything to make these people seem like a fraud, basically because they criticize Israel. So Israel will do everything possible to make them look like a fraud. In fact, if you look up Ilan Pappé, he was actually born in Israel and left there. One of the first things that comes up is one of the sloppiest historians in the world. So would you write that about any other politician or sorry, any other historian? No, but it's propaganda. You know, he said something bad about Israel, so he must be rubbished. He must be made to look untrustworthy, etc. Just like throughout this whole current war that's going on in Gaza, you know, one of the things you hear media say again and again and again and again is every time Palestinian deaths are mentioned, yeah, but they're from the Hamas. They're Hamas's numbers. The idea obviously being that you can't trust anything Hamas says. So they said 10,000 people are being killed. Well, obviously that can't be true because it's Hamas. That's mentioned in this book actually. Not that specifically, but what that is part of. The interesting thing is, it's now known that because Israeli, the military, the most moral army in the world. I mean, who the fuck calls their army the most moral in the world? It's got to be made up to cover something up. Yeah. This propaganda they pump out. Anyway, the IDF, the Israeli Death Forces, I like to call them, Israeli Defense Force, my fucking ass. They basically don't check how many people are being killed once they hit a target because that would waste time. They just want to get on and move on to the next target, which is being generated by AI, so they can hit hundreds of targets a day, and they don't bother checking the collateral damage. Nor do they go in to see what damage has been done because that'd be a waste of time when they can get on with killing. So guess where the Israeli military gets their actual numbers from? Where Israeli intelligence gets the numbers from? The Hamas controlled, so totally untrustworthy apparently, health ministry. So it's completely fucking trustworthy and they know it. And in past conflicts, all their numbers are being corroborated. Right? But anyway, on to the book. So, I mean, the book is so good because all this nonsense about the current conflict. It's not a conflict. The current violence, aggression, war, whatever you want to call it. This all began on October the 7th because of an unprovoked attack. It's not unprovoked. There's actually, I mean, the book is so good. Rather than go on about it, I'm just going to read sections from it. Keep in mind that it was South Africa that took Israel to the International Courts of Justice on the charges of genocide. That's that's so relevant because South Africa was obviously under apartheid, and there's a lot of parallels between South Africa and Israel, as well as there are lots of differences, because you've got Gaza on one side of Israel, and you've got the West Bank on the other side, and they're separated. And for a long, long time, Israel's, we can't negotiate with them because they're two separate entities. So how can we negotiate with a party that doesn't agree with itself? This was one of their reasons given for not negotiating. Yeah, not trying to even find a political solution for the problems in Gaza, right? And then Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza said, all right, we'll join together. Israel was furious. Shit, now we have to negotiate. And because Gaza is goes on to see it's the only way out of Palestine for Palestinians because they're trapped. They're basically, they're prisoners on their land. And in the West Bank, on one side you've got Jordan, which doesn't like Palestinians, and on the other side, obviously, you've got Israel. So you've got to read the book to understand all of what I'm trying to get across. But I think on page 72, there's something that I read and I thought, this is just incredible. This could be today. But this book was published, I believe, in 2010, something like that. So the idea that something can be written in 2010 and be so relevant today is completely at odds, and belies the whole nonsense about, oh, this current thing only started in October 2007 because of unprovoked attacks. Yeah, okay, read the fucking book and learn something. That's not to you, dear viewers. That's all the idiots who prescribe to the prevailing view. Anyway, let's start about here. Back in 1960, roughly, the apartheid regime, South African, recognized that it was becoming an international pariah. We know now from declassified documents that the foreign minister called the American ambassador and told him that he knew everyone was voting against him, but that as long as the US was backing them, they didn't care. That's pretty much what happened. By 1988 and a few years beyond, the US was still supporting South Africa strongly. Thatcher too, but it was mainly Reagan and the US. South Africa was okay. When US policy shifted, apartheid ended. One of the points in this book is that changing American policy is probably about the only thing that can stop Israeli expansion, Israeli aggression. For anybody who wants to put their hands up now and say, we're the victim, yeah, I'm not buying your bullshit, sorry. Yeah. It may appear to be the truth to anybody who lives in Israel, because Israel, from birth, will give you your propaganda. The propaganda. Ilan Pappé is a very interesting case. He says that when he actually realized what was going on in Israel and all the things he'd been told started to seem a bit untrue, and he looked into it, and he's a historian, so he can look into it. He thought, holy shit, I've been duped. When he actually started saying these things, as so many ex-Zionists are saying now, he's basically, severing ties with his family, with society and everything. He said it's like growing up in a super religious society and then one day turning around and becoming an atheist. But the punishment is greater than you'd get in those societies. They'll try and end your career. They'll try and destroy you. And countries sympathetic to Israel will try and destroy anybody who doesn't buy their bullshit. So look what happened to Corbyn. Yeah, you basically toe the line. Oh, we're going to call you an anti-Semite, and you're fucked. And then, interestingly, also Zionism, Israeli Zionism, Jewish Zionism, is predated by Christian Zionism, which, by the way, is incredibly anti-Semitic. Christian Zionism is get all the Jews in Palestine, because according to our reading of the Bible, that means Jesus will then come back, and us Christians will all be saved, and all these infidel Jews will just burn forever in hell. Woohoo! So, and also it solved the problem after the Second World War. They talk about this and how, when American forces and others went around concentration camps and saw all these people, they, oh shit, this is terrible, isn't it? Oh, we'd better do something. We'd better help them out here. But we don't want to inconvenience ourselves. Send them to Palestine. Yeah, we don't want them in America. They're bloody Jews, right? So part of the creation of Israel mainly was driven by incredibly anti-Semitic forces. So saying you're against Israel is not really saying you're anti-Semitic. I mean, it probably means you're not racist. In the current climate and with what's becoming obvious now to anybody who's been duped so far, is you can't really support Israel and not be a racist. Or you can't be anti-racist and support Israel. It reminds me of Corbyn. Let me get back to reading the book. So that's pretty much what happened. By 1988 and a few years beyond, the US was still supporting South Africa strongly. Thatcher too, but it was mainly Reagan and the US. South Africa was okay. When US policy shifted, apartheid ended. Israel is moving in exactly the same direction. By now, their sole support, virtually, is the US. This was written over 10 years ago. And the US looks incredibly fucking stupid every time they get one of their spokespeople to say, so what about the bombing of our chief hospital? Well, we'll do an investigation. Terrorist tunnels. I can't comment on that. When they mention Mads Gilbert in here as well, who's the physician, 76 years old now, who's worked in Gaza for nearly 2 decades. That's a hero. And he went on, was it TikTok, YouTube, one of these? I watch everything on YouTube. And he said, Biden, what kind of a president do you call yourself? And he detailed what's been happening. He's been there on the ground for nearly 2 decades. And in the background, you can hear children screaming, women screaming, because these people are being operated on without anesthetic. There is no anesthetic because Israel's made sure that none can get in, no medical supplies, nothing. In the news recently, people who were collecting aid, Israel, oh, we're Father Christmas, we love everybody, we just want to help people, shooting on people, collecting their aid from, starving people go to collect their aid trucks after Israel eventually lets them in, because there's tons of Israelis protesting, trying to block the aid from reaching them, which just shows how fucking indoctrinated and racist they are. These people have to die. It's great. And they're openly, look, this isn't just me mouthing off, they're openly saying it on their social media accounts. Oh, we haven't killed enough of them. And then there was that guy who got arrested, the racist guy, for abusing the New York food vendor, going about, oh shit, we didn't kill enough Palestinians today. This motherfucker was advising US presidents on Israeli policy, successive US presidents. A disgusting, vile, anti-Arab racist. When the Zionists, sorry if I mispronounced that, first went into Israel, so the myth was, a land without people for a people without land. They thought, oh shit, there's people there. Well, they knew there were people there, but they didn't give a damn. But when the rest of the world started finding out, they said, okay, well, you know what? These are just nomadic people, so they'll move along. They had no connection to the land, and anyway, it was a terrible, ugly desert before we came along and civilized it. It was European colonialization. So when Herzog, one of the founders of Zionism, wrote to Cecil Rhodes, said, "Help us out here. We want to civilize these savages, and you're good at that." Yeah. No racism there. No racism. No, God's word. Herzog, by the way, was, all this shit about God promised Israel to the Jews. He was an atheist. He didn't believe in God, but it was good propaganda, and he knew that. The man who didn't believe in God, who said, "God promised me something." They worried about blah 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 blah. Okay, so US was their sole support. By now, their sole support virtually is the US. They are becoming delegitimized. They are worried about it, but it's going to continue. It's inherent with the policy of expansion, disregard of international opinion, violations of international law. You can get away with it as long as you have the biggest thug on the block protecting you. And these are the guys who, after the criminal, after the court ruled that they have to take measures to prevent genocide. Of course, Ben Gavir's come out, oh, I hate Schmeig, yeah, who the fuck are they? We can ignore them because we're basically just criminals, we always have been, so why pay attention now? What's the other one? They were told by the same court to take down their apartheid law 20 years ago. They've ignored it. So why is anybody surprised? Before the ruling actually came out, which was yesterday, Friday, you had top rabbis saying, oh, by the way, they've got the international court, even though they're a signatory, Israel's signatory, has no moral authority, and of course they're all anti-Semitic, they're all racist. It's such bullshit. Why do people keep falling for it? Oh, sorry, I forgot, because they've got the biggest thug on the block protecting them. Anyway, back to this. As long as you have the biggest thug on the block protecting you, but that's a weak support because it's going to erode in the US too, just like it did with South Africa. You can already see it happening. The US anti-apartheid movement really started in the 80s, 20 years later than it did in England. But it did develop, and it was significant that it changed policy. I mean, you could pretty much change in the history of South Africa everywhere in the topic of Israel. The problem with Israel is a lot more brutal because in South Africa they needed the black population. They were the workforce, so 85%. The whole idea of creating a Jewish state with Jewish supremacy and Jewish majority in a place that there's already an Arab non-Jewish majority, but they used to live perfectly fine together, the Christians, the Palestinian Jews and the Muslims. They don't want that. See, the Israelis don't want or need or see any reason for the Palestinians, non-Jewish Palestinians, to live. That's the difference between South Africa and Israel. One of the main differences, very, very interestingly, has something you'll never hear from America. America, the great supporter of South African apartheid until the very last days. What nobody in America will tell you, and what I learned from this book, is Cuba was a massive instigator of the end of apartheid. Can't say that though, because Cuba's evil communists. They can never do anything. Cuba sent troops into Africa and kicked the whites out of places like Namibia, crushed the this kind of illusion of the Superman, the superior white man. They kicked their asses, and that was a major factor in ending apartheid. I mean, Israel tried to help them out, by the way. Israel wanted to give South Africa. Israel aren't racist. No, 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 no. Israel wanted to give South Africa nuclear weapons, you know, so they could crush more, of these hideous black people. Yes. I know that Israel took in lots of black Jews and everything. They're very good at propaganda. This whole thing about when they pulled out of the West Bank was basically because the West Bank was expensive to keep Jews in. So they thought, fuck it, let's pull out and present it. And this has been done more than once as this really nice concession we're giving to these evil, terrible, violent, ungrateful Arabs. And just make us look good. You got to read the book, guys. And then as for these ceasefires, calling for a ceasefire, let's go back. Because what's happening now, I mean, it's the most brutal war by many measures. Most civilians killed, more civilians killed there already than have been killed in Ukraine, right? And Ukraine's been going for years. More damage done there than was done by Allied forces to German cities in World War II, which went on. And World War II was before there were laws against not killing civilians. Israel doesn't care about the law. Britain doesn't care about the law, for God's sake. This bullshit about, we're going to bomb the Houthis to protect human, to protect human rights. You don't give a damn about human rights. One of the biggest killing sprees of Israel came after, and America as well, 2006, when in a carefully controlled election, the Palestinians dared to vote for Hamas. Democracy, guys, remember democracy? America didn't like that, so they tried to, stage a coup like they did in Argentina and everywhere else. Hamas saw it coming and basically stopped that, and now they're really pissed off. So they started doing this thing called mowing the lawn, which is basically a carpet bomb, mass murder. Wait for someone to call a ceasefire. Hamas agrees to the ceasefire, and this has happened again and again. And Israel's like, okay, now we better piss them off enough so they have to strike back. And then when they do, you mow the lawn again. Basically, carpet bomb, blow up the airport, blow up the seaport. Not as bad as what they're doing now. Oh, self-defense. Anyway, so let me read you a bit more. This is turning into a long review, but this really is quite a killer of a book. Where's that one inside? Look at this chapter by Ilan Pappé. A brief history of Israel's incremental genocide. And this was written, a long time before South Africa actually had the balls to do what they did. In September 2006 article for the Electric Intifada, I defined the Israeli policy toward the Gaza Strip as incremental genocide. Israel's present assault, when this book was written, not the one that's going on now. There's always one going on, it's just not in the news. What's really interesting is the day the International Courts of Justice said Israel has to prevent genocide. Guess what? It wasn't in any of the papers. It wasn't mentioned on any mainstream British channels until about 10 p.m. at night. They're talking about the king in hospital. Who cares? I mean, he's an old guy anyway. They spend a lot of time in hospital. But you mustn't point out the fact that Israel actually got, given this judgment. They didn't even present on British TV South Africa's initial case. What they did was they streamed live Israel's defense. And of course that started with saying, oh look, somebody shuffled my papers, it's sabotage, because Israel's always the victim. It's such clowns, bloodthirsty clowns. Anyway, Israel's present assault on Gaza alas indicates that this policy continues unabated. The term is important since it appropriately locates Israel's barbaric action then and now within the wider historical context. People in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine feel disappointed at the lack of any significant international reaction to the carnage and destruction the Israeli assault has so far left behind in the Strip. The inability or unwillingness to act seems to be first and foremost an acceptance of the Israeli narrative and argumentation for the crisis in Gaza. This is a good bit. Israel has developed a very clear narrative about the present carnage in Gaza. It is a tragedy caused by the unprovoked Hamas missile attack on the Jewish state. Sound familiar? To which Israel has to react in self-defense. While mainstream Western media, academia and politicians may have reservations about the proportionality of the force used by Israel, old story, they just let them keep killing. They accept the gist of this argument. This Israeli narrative is totally rejected in the world of cyber activism and alternative media. There it seems condemnation of the Israeli action as a war crime is widespread and consensual. The main difference between the two analyses from above and from below is the willingness of activists to study deeper and in a more profound way the ideological and historical context of the present Israeli action in Gaza, which is actually just a continuation of what started in 1940. Well, it started in the 1930s, actually, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians by Israel. An incremental policy of massive killing that is less a product of callous intention and more the inevitable outcome of Israel's overall strategy towards Palestine in general and the areas it occupied in 1967 in particular. There's so much of this book I could just read to you, but read it. I think it should be essential reading. I think the world is finally waking up as it did to the apartheid, and I think the most important thing is America is realizing how stupid and racist and dumb it looks and is being for supporting Israel. And you'll hear a lot of Jewish voices saying this a lot. They'll mainly be silenced, or arrested, or in Israel just beaten to shitty pulp by the Zionists. At least they're just not shot in the back of the head. When free by a breakaway group, that wasn't Hamas, by the way. Oh, this was 2006. Free settlers were killed. So Israel knew they were dead straight away, but they said, no, they've been taken hostage. We have to go in and get them. So that allowed them to do one of their killing sprees. Guess what they did in retaliation? They kidnapped a teenager and burned him alive. Didn't hear about that in the news, though, did you? To hear about that, if any news station had covered that, would have been anti-Semitic. Read the book, guys, on Palestine. Really, really good. And do what you can. I'm not going to tell you which way to go, but wake up, have some morals, guys. Yeah, and girls. Hope you enjoyed that. It's getting late, and this is a long one, so I do apologise if you stayed till the end. Good on you. Bought a few more books today, so there'll be more reviews coming.